So today we have with us multidisciplinary artist and designer Gaurav Ogale, whose unique practice takes shape in the interstices between drawing, storytelling, film, music, and sound. He was chosen to be part of the India Art Fair with Apple this year and the digital artist residency that they provided, and visual researcher in residence in Berlin in 2022. Gaurav has contributed to National Geographic, Traveler India, The Wall Street Journal, Condé Nast Traveler, Vogue India, Grazia India, The Indian Express, and more. So, hi Gaurav, welcome to Abir Poti.
Hi,
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
thank you for having me.
So, I think the first thing I wanted to ask you was, why don't you tell us more about your journey into visual art? Like, where did it start from?
Sure. Firstly, thank you so much for having me. It's always wonderful to sort of talk about your practice because, in your head, you're also revisiting a lot of things which you might have just parked,
Hmm.
along the way. In terms of visual arts, I think, I was always a very, very curious, but a very quiet child. And I started painting when I was really young. So painting kind of was my medium to, respond, to express, to document. um, and like all Indian families, while I was growing up, they were like, okay, why don't you pursue something in in this, right? But nobody really
Hmm.
knows about I mean, back then it was still kind of unexplored, no, because like today we are very sort of familiar with the idea of design and application of design in so many things. But like a decade ago, we were still sort of warming up to creatives just being like something to do with architecture or
Hmm.
interior design and all of that. So I pursued my design studies, and I decided to go ahead with filmmaking for my last year, in my
Hmm.
last year. And I think that kind of really triggered something because I went there by default, to be very honest. And right after that, I started working in advertising. I was working with National Geographic.
Hmm.
And somewhere that film, just that film background stayed with me, but I was not really making films. And
Hmm.
now, after like a huge gap, I feel I'm kind of now marrying my drawings and my
Hmm.
film and
Hmm.
making it into some kind of medium that I feel is like
Right.
a like a mixed media sort of a thing. Yeah.
Hmm. That's really cool. So, I mean, you mentioned a little bit about it, but what was your exposure to art in, like, for example, your childhood? Like, what were your early influences?
My grandfather was an engineer. And but a very passionate engineer. Like he was an engineer because he really liked engineering. He liked machines, he liked the technical thinking. But he also had this other side to him, which was of he really admired artists, young artists. And because he lived in a very small town, he used to commission works, back then, to like local artists.
Hmm.
Like, say, here's your like a Sousa painting or a Raza painting, and why don't you like
Hmm.
replicate it for me? Back then it was a big
Hmm.
thing to just replicate masters. So I kind of grew up in this environment where I saw my grandfather always filling up our walls with huge paintings. um, some of them some of them were original, some of them were like replicas of famous paintings that you saw. So I kind of understood that world very early on. And he
Hmm.
also had other interests, like he was greatly into sort of growing roses. And he had a lot of animals in the house and all of that. So I think I grew up in a space which was very dreamy. It was very free. Like both my parents were always very sort of liberal. They never told me do this, do that. So I grew up in a
Hmm.
very, very carefree kind of an environment. And I feel usually it's other way around, right? Like you in India, you grow up being more sort of disciplined, and then when you're an adult, you want to break free and you have to do all sorts of things.
Right.
Yes, I always had that exposure in a sense that I was never told like don't do this or don't do that. So I think that was my influence. I don't think my influences was so much to do with being with a painter or having, sort of
Hmm.
interactions with artists. It was just this environment,
Right.
just people like my mother or my grandfather sort of arranging the house in
Hmm.
a certain way, getting things custom made, getting clothes custom made. I think those kind of references were much more stronger for me.
Hmm. Yeah. So I think you mentioned your kind of your the way you're marrying different forms of art, and I think the one that I love and the one that I think is everywhere on your social media is you've collaborated with Dr. Tharoor, you've collaborated with Zoya and Kalki for the Words and Visual series. So what was your inspiration behind the series, and what was your favorite collaboration?
Sorry. So the words and visuals. Actually, the series was born during the pandemic. Sorry, just
Hmm.
excuse me. I just want.
No, thanks.
And so what happened was, for all these years, because I was working in advertising and majorly in the arts, I was not really focusing so much on my personal practice, which is of an artist or painter or whatever. Um, and when I came back, so I was in Bombay and I came back to Pune because that's my hometown, and I spent the entire lockdown here. And
Hmm.
I realized I had a huge archive of drawings, like drawings,
Hmm.
visuals, like just images had stored, cut out, and all of that. And um, since a long time, it's been playing in my head that I wanted to sort of have some kind of a motion to these drawings, because when I make a drawing, it's never static, right? Like even if you draw a person,
Yeah.
you draw the person in a static form, but in your head, you remember that person's
Hmm.
laughter, or the way the person sneezes, or the way the person talks, and all of that. So in my head, every drawing had a story, but it was static, and I felt
Hmm.
that in some way it was kind of getting trapped in that small book. So I
Hmm.
started sort of just experimenting with moving them, and the most natural thing that came to me was to marry them with words. And
Hmm.
so I started sort of collaborating with some people I knew, and then it just kind of grew organically. And then someone told, oh hey, let's like uh, check this out, and then they said, okay, I also want to do it, and all of that. But mainly it was
Hmm.
people I felt, you know you always have an idea around a person, right? Like anybody from that
Hmm.
series I collaborated with, they're known for what they do, but I wanted to sort of work with
Hmm.
them in a way that is more intimate. So, for example, with
Hmm.
Zoya, she actually wrote a poem, and
Hmm.
sorry, she in fact mentioned to me later that she said she never shows her journals to anybody, and this was actually written in one of those. So I think that time was such that everybody was kind of uh, opening up, warming up to new
Hmm.
things. Everybody wanted to express. Everybody had a lot to say. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think that series particularly was born out of just this experiment of merging all sorts of all formats of work, whether it's a haiku, poetry, long form, short form, everything.
Hmm. Which one was a
And
favorite? You didn't say.
favorite, I really enjoyed as an artist, I think I really enjoyed working with Jim Sub. Because
Hmm.
he picked this poem by William Carlos William, and
Hmm.
it was a very interesting one because so William Carlos William was also known to be a very visually driven poet. And
Hmm.
when I was working with Jim, I realized that he also is a very sort of, he's very visual. Like
Hmm.
even if he's performing, he has a very clear visual graph. And
Hmm.
while we were collaborating on this, we would have a lot of conversations about how this line should sound like, how this line
Hmm.
should appear, what happens, what's going on in this person's head, and all of that. So I think, as a
Hmm.
process, I think I enjoyed that the most.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's actually very interesting. Um, so I think I also was really I was wondering what is the most challenging piece that you've worked on as an artist?
Um, it's I have this thing, okay, like whenever I'm starting, when I start work on something, I always feel like I don't know anything, you know, and
Yeah.
I kind of like get fully sort of submerged in anxiety. And it's not like
Hmm.
anxiety in a sense that, I'm like panicking or something, but it's just like, I feel that, oh, is this what I do? Can I do this? Do I know how to do this? And all of that. So I don't think I can point out at one particular project.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, as cliche as it may sound, I think every project is like, I mean, not every project is challenging, but I feel, okay, let me put it this way. So, when I'm working on something or with somebody, I really feel it's
Hmm.
important for the other person to understand why they have got me on board, you know. And I
Right.
feel
Yeah.
that sometimes, because I work independently, I work with a lot of brands, a lot of people, and it's a mixed thing, right? Like I work on editorials, I work on lifestyle brands, luxury brands, I mean artists, all of that. So I feel sometimes people have such a clear idea of how they see things that they come
Hmm.
to me saying that, oh, this is exactly what I want. And that I
Hmm.
think is the challenging part. Because if you
Hmm.
are coming to me with a very specific idea, then I
Yeah.
think you are not really leaving any room for me to bring in myself.
Hmm.
So that's one. And then there's this other end of the spectrum where people say, I don't know what I want. So do whatever you want. And that's also challenging.
Hmm.
I think somewhere on that scale in the middle, uh, is that
Hmm.
spot where I feel, people, I mean, ideally, an ideal collaborator should be somebody who says that, listen, this is something I want to make. This is something I can offer, and the rest is up to you. And then, it comes together beautifully. So I think the
Yeah.
two ends of the spectrum are the challenges for me. Yeah.
I think this answer is like very much leading to the next question, where I was thinking about as an artist, there's commissioned work, and then there's work you do for your soul.
Yeah.
So, I mean, have you always been able to create a balance between the two, or does one aid with the other?
Um, I think the latter is more relevant because I think, yes. So, um, I've always worked. I mean, I've never been just an artist. Uh,
Hmm.
so in a way, like, to support myself, I've always worked. It's just that since last year I've been working independently, but before that I always was in a full-time job, so which meant that I only had time for myself after 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. in the night, right? And
Hmm.
for all these years everything I have made is post 9 p.m. So
Hmm.
it's almost like I came home from a certain job, and then I switched and I went into my own world post midnight, and then created whatever I wanted to create. It's only very, very recently that I finally decided, okay, now I want to do more of this, and which is why I am now not sort of associated with one brand or a company. It's just like I
Hmm.
take on projects completely on my own.
Hmm.
So I think that then sort of enables me to save time and also money to then support my
Hmm.
independent practice. Like for instance, now that
Hmm.
I'm going for a residency, I can entirely support it myself. So I don't
Hmm.
have to worry about, okay, now I have to apply for this grant. I mean, it's great, but it's just that
Hmm.
because I'm always working and taking on commission works, I can support my personal journey and growth as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. Why don't you talk to me about the digital art residency that you were doing with India Art Fair? And I think tell me more about your collection, Moving Memories, and what kind of where that came from.
Yeah. So last year, I actually was on my way to another residency in France,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
before that, I had applied for the India Art Fair and Apple digital residency. Um, and it's strange, but like throughout my life, I've never really sort of, when I apply for something, I know I'm not going to get it. So I had
Right.
applied, and I had forgotten about it, and I said, this is not going to happen, so let's not even think about it.
Hmm.
um, and I knew it was Apple, it was India Art Fest. I was like, definitely it's not happening. So I was ready to go to France, and just a week or two before that, they reached out to me and they said, "Oh, you have been selected for this residency," and I'm like,
Hmm.
"Oh my God, now everything is going to go haywire because I was not prepared for this." So my process usually is that, like, when I am taking on something or when I'm about to work on a project, I do a lot of work in my head before that.
Hmm.
So I prepare myself, like I try to enter that world of what I want to create. But with residencies, what happens is, you get into that zone only when you start the residency, right? So
Hmm.
they had a very interesting brief, which was, they wanted us to create something that depicts the extraordinary in the ordinary. And
Hmm.
we had to create it with the Apple hardware, and basically merging it with our individual practice. We were three artists who were chosen for this. So for my project, what I actually wanted to explore was, when you go to a bookstore, right, you see the best
Hmm.
selling section, but
Hmm.
it's always about people who are already famous or already known,
Hmm. Hmm.
or it's about somebody who's already kind of established. So
Hmm.
I always looked at it, and I felt, who decides that who deserves a biography, or who deserves a beautifully crafted book cover, like with this beautiful typography and all of that. And why not people who we meet on a day-to-day basis on the road, at a tailor, just in our normal lives, right? Because people have extraordinary stories, and I feel they also deserve to be in those classically bound gold foiled books.
Hmm.
And which
Hmm.
is why I chose six stories of people I have met, during the 10 years that I lived in Bombay. So there's like a taxi driver, there's a hijra who comes on the signal, there is uh, there's a rafugar. I mean, there are a lot of people, So I decided to make these the biography covers, and the thing is, we made these very classical looking physical books, and we embedded the iPads in it. So each page was
Hmm.
animated. So you could wear your headphones, you could flip through the story. Some pages had just text, some pages had
Hmm.
visual. There was also sound. So I wanted people
Hmm.
to just immerse themselves in this audiovisual kind of narrative, and just explore
Hmm.
lives of people who you would otherwise just call ordinary.
Hmm. Oh, that's a very cool idea. So, I mean, I think while you were having these experiences in Mumbai, were you ever thinking about the fact that these could be something bigger than just a conversation you've had with someone?
Not really, because I actually
Hmm.
dug out my personal archives, and I realized I had these. So there was this taxi driver, and I made one book on him, and he
Hmm.
actually sang for me, one of the days in the taxi, and I had a voice note. So I actually dug it
Hmm.
out, and I used the original piece in the installation as well. So I think for me, it's a very natural thing to just document something that's kind of speaks to me, or that's kind of that stays with me. And then I feel, I keep revisiting that through my work. Sometimes you get a
Hmm.
chance, if you're lucky enough, you get a chance to revisit your memories sooner, and sometimes you have to wait for a long time to
Hmm.
go. Yeah.
Okay, and my last but my most important question is, what is next for you and what are you currently working on?
Okay, so so I'm actually going for another residency. It's at the same place where I went last year in Berlin. It's called Somos Arts, and I'm there for the next 2 months.
Hmm.
That's more to kind of focus on my own practice. I am
Hmm.
thinking of spending some time also just sort of painting. Because that's something that's very close to me. Um, Apart from that, I'm actually working on so I can give like very brief details about it, but
Okay.
it's the first time I'm working on a opening title sequence for a film. So that's something fun that will sort of um, I mean, that's something I'm kind of working on right now. And of course, other sort of commissioned works, like there's some editorial projects. Yeah.
You actually got cut off right before you told me what you're working on, and I could only hear you say I can only give brief details, so I got more excited, and I think the Wi-Fi got cut off. Could you tell me
Oh,
that again?
of course. So I'm working on a opening title sequence for a film, and
Okay.
yeah, but it's also like it's more in a medium that I've been exploring.
Hmm.
So I think that would be really fun.
Hmm.
I'm still working on it, so hopefully we'll be able to see it very soon.
No, that's pretty cool. So, I mean, you were off to Berlin. So, what is that residency about? Is it just you focusing on your painting, or are these things you're even exploring there with a group of people?
So the residency has other artists who will be there at the same time.
Hmm.
But this, I mean, every year I go for a residency with a very focused goal. But this time I'm actually
Hmm.
just going there to just take some time to think, to to do my usual work and my job, but also take time off and just move around the city. There's also the Berlin Art Week that's going to happen next week,
Hmm.
so it'll be an
Yeah.
interesting time to see contemporary art from all over the world.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I love like
It's all
huge
very
art.
exciting. It's all
Yeah,
very exciting things.
thank you. I hope it all shapes up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Gaurav, for talking to us today. I'm going to let you go because you have a flight to catch, and I cannot be the reason you missed that flight. Uh, but all the very best for everything, and please keep us updated with what you do. And we would love to kind of talk to you again soon and see what you're up to.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It was lovely chatting with you as always.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gaurav.